the president of the American Pro-Life OBGYNs, and I have her bio right now. So I'm going to read it. It's also on your what? Your app. So you can follow along if you'd like to, okay? So this morning we are blessed to have Dr. Donna Harrison with us. In her bio it says she received a BS and BA in chemistry and biochemistry from Michigan State University, Maryland? No, Michigan. And residency, it says Michigan State, right? That's for me, okay. And residency from the University of Michigan with additional studies in international medicine at University of Arizona, Tucson. She served as Associate Clinical Professor of obstetrics, and gynecology at the University of Michigan, then entered private practice with a multi-specialty group involved in international medicine. While in private practice, she served on community health projects, both locally and in Haiti and India. Dr. Harrison then retired from clinical practice to serve in women's health policy positions, most recently as president of the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. She has testified before the local, state, and federal government, as well as the UN, and has lectured in medical schools, universities, and CME conferences, as well as published on the long-term effects of after abortion. Especially, and I think she'll be talking about this today, mifepristone, and I might be saying that wrong, and maternal mortality and MDG5. So you can access her, you can reach her at that email below, but let's go ahead and give a warm welcome to Dr. Donna Harrison.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here and delighted to see everybody. Oh goodness, this historic event, the first march after Roe fell. It's an amazing. I don't want you to think that just because there was a change at the Supreme Court level that our work is done. My friends, our work is just beginning. We now have a discussion that's starting, or that should have happened 50 years ago, starting at the state level. Every single state in the country will have this debate going on, and your voice is critically important. And how you articulate this argument determines whether hearts and minds are changed and whether lives are saved. So I'm here to try to help you articulate the argument for life, for our neighbor, in maybe a different way than what you've seen before. So hang on. The talk is about who is my neighbor. And good. I found the clicker error there. I love icons. I just think that they're a wonderful art form, and the more you look at them, the more fascinating they get. So this is the icon of who is my neighbor. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What's written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You've answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "Well, who is my neighbor?" And in reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite came, and when he came to the place and saw him, and passed by on the other side. But then a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense I may have. So which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Very interesting. The priest saw the man, but did not see him as a neighbor. The Levite saw the man, but did not see him in relationship to himself. It was a foreigner who recognized the common humanity of this man who was in trouble. I think there's a profound story in that for us who are pro-life. Because where you stand on the abortion debate depends exactly on how you view the entity, the thing in the womb. Biology clearly demonstrates that a human being exists in the womb from the time of fertilization. We protect and cherish other human beings because they are human, just as we are human. They bear the image of God just as we bear the image of God. We cherish them because God cherishes them, and He cherishes us. So, this is a very profound thing. If you want to get past the rhetoric, and past the buzzwords, and past the trigger words, let's get down to what we're really talking about here in this abortion issue. We as human beings recognize to be like us other human beings or other human persons. That's our circle. That's our circle of protection. Human beings and human persons are within that circle, and entities outside that circle can be treated as property, rightly so. Your dog's not a person. Your tree outside is not a person. You can cut it down. It's okay. What happens when we separate human beings from human persons? Slavery, because they're not persons after all. Maybe they're 3/5 of a person, but they're not personal. Genocide. We can get rid of those kind of people because they're not persons. They're not people we protect. Euthanasia. They're no longer a person. They were a person, but now they're no longer, so we can harvest their organs. It's okay. Infanticide. Boy, that baby has no quality of life. They're not really a person, so we can get rid of them. And abortion. That thing in the womb is just a fetus, which, by the way, is the Latin for young being. And we can get rid of them. They're not a person. So I want to dissect this for you, because this is actually the crux of the rhetorical argument that faces us in every single state over the next 5 to 10 years. Actually, now, and over the next 5 to 10 years. So we're going to take some time to define human being, and take some time to define human person, and we're going to take some time to look at abortion, what is it? If the abortion, what is it category is too much for you, just put your head down for 5 minutes. You'll understand when I'm done talking. And I'm not going to do any graphic slides, but I have to do enough of an explanation that, you know, it is what it is. We have to know what it is that we're fighting about, we have to know what it is that we're arguing about in order to intelligently argue. Because as pro-life people, you have to know the argument of the pro-abortion side better than the pro-abortion people know it. You have to know it so well that you can actually articulate the faults in it. And that's what I'm here to help you do. Human being. This is a very complicated definition. If you look up the American Heritage Medical Dictionary, a human being is a human. You know? So it's kind of it's one of those self-evident things. I'm human, you're human. We get it. Let me take a minute Might need some technical help with this. Hold on just a second. I'll find it out. Technical help here. I need to get out of this and get to the video. All right, let me see if that. Okay. Guess we just fixed it. We're going to watch this. It's brief, but it's actually pretty poignant.
This is Olivia. Though she has yet to greet the outside world, she has already completed an amazing journey. This is the moment that life begins. A new human being has come into existence. At fertilization, her gender, ethnicity, hair color, eye color, and countless traits are already determined. She begins to implant in the uterus about 1 week after fertilization. Her cells organize into what we call an embryo. At 3 weeks and 1 day, just 22 days after fertilization, Olivia's heartbeat can be detected. The buds of her arms and legs appear by 4 weeks. She begins to move between 5 and 6 weeks with both spontaneous and reflexive movements. At 6 weeks from fertilization, her brain activity can be recorded and bone formation begins. She can bring her hands together at 7.5 weeks, and separate fingers and toes emerge. She can also begin to hiccup. At the beginning of the 9th week, Olivia will have grown from a single cell into nearly 1 billion cells, and she is now called a fetus. She will suck her thumb and swallow, grasp an object, touch her face, sigh, and stretch. At 11 weeks, she is playing in the womb, moving her body and exploring her environment. Her taste bud cells have matured by week 12, but are still scattered throughout her mouth. Her mother will first sense Olivia's movements between 14 and 18 weeks, an event called quickening. Beginning at 18 weeks, ultrasound shows speaking movements in her voice box. Around 20 weeks, with a lot of help, babies have survived outside the womb. At 27 weeks, her eyes are responding to light. She can recognize her parents' voices and will even recognize lullabies and stories. Olivia has gone on an amazing journey during these last 9 months. She will soon signal to her mother that it is time for delivery and greet the outside world.
Pretty amazing. I mean, actually, when I tell students when I'm teaching them about reproductive biology, is if there's anything that would make you fall on your knees, study embryology. It is absolutely amazing that from one cell, we all came to be who we are today. We all made this journey. So, is Olivia a human being? Well, what is the criteria for a human being? The life of a new human being commences at a scientifically well-defined event, the fusion of the plasma membranes, that's a cell membrane, of the sperm and egg. Period. That's the embryological definition of a new human organism. This conclusion is not a matter of religious belief. It's not a matter of societal convention. That is, a social construct. It's a matter of objective scientific observation. First, the embryo is from the start, distinct from any cell of the mother or father. The embryo, which actually, a little bit of, I'm not going to quibble with the video, but little bit of detail. The embryo starts at the moment of sperm-egg membrane fusion. It is a one-celled embryo. There's no such thing as a fertilized egg, guys. There's a sperm, there's an egg, and when they combine, they are a one-celled embryo, which turns into a two-celled embryo, which turns into a 4-cell, 8-cell, 16-cell. You know, it goes on and on with cell division. But the terms are important because the terms, the definition, the words are rhetorical, and they have rhetorical power. It is easier to recognize a neighbor in a one-celled embryo than it is to recognize a neighbor in a fertilized egg. It just is. We eat fertilized eggs. You know, we don't eat embryos. So the terms have power, and that's why it's really critically important to be completely scientifically accurate when you are talking about this issue. So the embryo is, from the start, distinct from any cell of the mother or father. This is clear because the embryo is growing in her own distinct direction. She is directing her own survival and maturation. That's the definition of an organism, as opposed to an organ or something that's a cancer. Second, the embryo is human. She isn't a pig, a dog, or a pine tree. I've never delivered a woman with a pine tree, ever. You know, so this is a human being. So it's a being who is human. She has the genetic makeup characteristic of human beings. She is therefore a human being. And third and most important, the embryo is a complete or whole organism. She meets the scientific criteria of organism, self-directed behavior, her own genetic makeup. She is immature, no doubt about it, but she's fully programmed to use the information in her own being to develop herself into a mature human being. She just happens to be an immature human being at that moment of sperm-egg membrane fusion. In light of the evidence, alternative views of when human life begins and when a developing human is the subject of rights, that is, viability, or when the fetus is capable of conscious awareness, these are ideas thrown out as to when we give human beings rights, are both scientifically unsound and have significant negative implications for the ethical treatment of all human beings. So we've talked about human being. Well, how is it different from human person? A human being is a human. A human person is the object of legal rights. So that's the difference. Person is a legal term. It's not a scientific term. There are two kinds of legal persons: human beings and artificial persons such as corporations. That is the legal definition of person. And now we get into who is my neighbor. Can you recognize a human being? And how do we recognize other human beings? It's this whole concept of metaphysical personhood. Adult human beings are commonly considered persons. And a very interesting question to ask yourself is that of exactly what it is about us that makes us a person. Clearly not having a particular hair color, or even having hair, or being a particular height or weight, or having, when they say having brain, they mean being intelligent. That clearly does not make us persons. Well, the idea of metaphysical personhood would be to use personhood as a category of reality encompassing human beings of a certain type, i.e., human beings who have certain characteristics. Rational, how rational do you have to be? Moral agents, using language, which language? There's no consensus about the criteria for human personhood, or metaphysical personhood. Here are some suggested criteria: rationality, logical reasoning ability. Well, that might actually, eliminate half the human race. Consciousness. What happens when we put you under anesthesia? Do you cease being a person? Self-consciousness, self-awareness. So if you don't know you're there, or you're not self-conscious for a moment, does that make you not a person? Use of language. What language? Verbal language? Sign language? Other language? Art? Ability to initiate action. So if you can't initiate an action and you're tied up, you cease to be a person. Moral agency and the ability to engage in moral judgments. Well, then very few people are moral agents before 25. Okay, I mean, look at the slippery slope of this. This is based, or intelligence. How intelligent do you have to be? Okay. Does having one or more of these make us a person? Do we have to have all of them? Can we have some minimal set of personhood? Does it have to be the same set for all persons? See, this is the problem when you separate human being from human person. And who gets to decide who's a person? Again, separating all human beings from our circle of protection allows for these horrors, which we all recognize to be horrible and wrong. I want you, if you don't remember anything else at the top, I do want you to remember SLED. Size, level of development, environment, or dependency. Let's look at size when we consider the human being in the womb. The human being in the womb is clearly smaller than a born human being, no doubt about it. But a 4-year-old is smaller than a 14-year-old. So if we can't reasonably kill a 4-year-old simply because the 4-year-old is smaller than a 14-year-old, then we also cannot reasonably say that we can kill a human being in the womb because he or she is smaller than a born human being. Size does not determine whether you are a person. Level of development. A human being in the womb is definitely less developed than a born human being. And a 10-year-old is less developed than a 20-year-old. So we can't justify killing 10-year-olds simply because they're less developed than the 20-year-old. We also can't justify killing human beings in the womb because they're less developed than born human beings. Environment. The human being in the womb is in a different environment, no doubt about it. So is an astronaut or a scuba diver. Since we don't justify killing scuba divers or astronauts when they're in a different environment, how can we justify killing a human being just because they're a few inches away from being outside the womb? Doesn't make any logical sense, guys. What about degree of dependency? Human beings in the womb are definitely dependent on their mothers, no doubt about it. Newborns, toddlers, preschoolers, and early teens are also dependent on their parents. But that doesn't justify killing them. What we're talking about here in the abortion debate is a matter of systemic injustice on a massive scale. There's something in psychology called the superego lacuna. Let me dissect that term for you. It's a big hole in your brain. It's a big hole in your thinking. And as a culture, we have a huge superego lacuna over the issue of abortion. We refuse to see it for what it is. And your job is going to be to gently, lovingly be able to show people what this issue really is about. It's about human beings who are not considered persons. I want to give you some historic examples from the United States. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Dred Scott, but if you ever feel like vomiting, pull up the Supreme Court decision on Dred Scott. Okay, this is a quote from the Supreme Court decision. The question of whether or not Dred Scott qualified as a human being was considered to be a moot one by the court. Sorry, that one's not the direct quote. That's a summary because the quote is much longer. The crucial question was whether or not he qualified as a person. That is a full member of American society. So the Supreme Court, let me, for those of you who don't remember this history, Dred Scott's a free man who was taken into slavery. And he said, no, I'm free, I'm living here. And the issue went all the way up to the Supreme Court. He was living in a free state. And the Supreme Court was asked by Dred Scott's lawyers to say, look, Dred Scott's a human being, he's a person. He is guaranteed, he is guaranteed to be defended as a person. And the Supreme Court said, no, okay, he's a human being, we cannot deny that. But the question is he a person? Separating that human being from human person. person. So what the Supreme Court decided that he was like 3/5 of a person. Oh my gosh. All right, let's compare the issue now to Roe versus Wade, which I know is overturned, but believe me, the thought process lives on in the hearts of many. This is Justice Blackmun, the majority opinion. He said, the appellee, that is, the person who was saying that abortion is wrong and Texas should be able to protect human beings in the womb, that's the appellee. And certain amnesty, i.e. my association, American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, argue that the fetus is a person within the language and meaning of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is the amendment to the Constitution that happened after the Civil War and after slavery was made illegal. We said all human beings all born human beings are persons. I'll quote it for you. So Blackmun, who authored the majority opinion in Roe, said, if the personhood of the fetus is established, then the appellant, that's Roe's case, the one who wanted abortion legal, the appellant's case collapses because the fetus's right to life is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. So the entire crux of Roe versus Wade is the human being in the womb a person? That's what it all rested on, as is recognized here by the Justice Blackmun. This is what the 14th Amendment says. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So what Justice Blackmun was saying was, if you can establish that the fetus is a person, 14th Amendment applies. But what they said was, well, we're not going to cover the issue of whether the fetus is a person. We're just going to say, the mom's a person, so she's the only one that counts. That's what Roe did. This is from a review of the 14th Amendment in person. The Supreme Court can define person to include all human beings, born and unborn. It simply chooses not to do so. Science, history, and tradition establish that unborn human beings are, from the time of conception, both persons and human beings, thus strongly supporting an interpretation that the unborn meet the definition of person under the 14th Amendment. As a matter of fact, they meet the definition of person better than a corporation does, by the way. So those are the issues. Human being, human person. Remember, the priest did not recognize the neighbor in the guy who was beaten. Neither did the Levite. But the Samaritan recognized, here is a fellow human being. Here's a person who I have obligations, unchosen obligations before God to protect and defend and care for. And that's the difference, and that's what we're being called to do. And what are we being called to protect that person from? So here, if you want to put your head down, 5 minutes, I will not be offended. We're going to talk about abortion and what it is. Actually, there's 2 things I want you to take home from the talk. I figured, not just SLED, but I want you to take this slide home from the talk too. Okay? Because what is an abortion? The abortion is the termination of pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus. There are 2 aspects to this definition. And actually, it historically only applies before the baby can live outside the womb. After the baby can live outside the womb, our definitions lack, because there was never a thought that you would intentionally kill a human being after they could live outside the womb. So these are older definitions. But there's 2 aspects. One is the separation of the mother and the fetus before the fetus can live outside the womb. And the second is the death of the fetus. So there's 2 aspects to abortion. So let's take the first aspect, the separation of the mom and the fetus. Sometimes moms and babies spontaneously separate. She's got an infection, she delivers. It's called a miscarriage. Baby dies. This separation happens without any human intervention. We also, if we look beyond 20 weeks, we can say, well, births are also a separation, but hopefully don't result in the death of the fetus. So the separation can happen spontaneously, or the separation can happen because we intervene, because of human intervention. And there are two reasons, generally, that the separations happen because of intervention. One, if it's before the baby can live outside the womb, unfortunately, there are times we have to save the life of the mom. We have to separate the mom and the baby, because if we separate them, the mom lives and the baby dies. And if we don't separate them, the mom dies and the baby dies. We lose two or we lose one. It's horrible. We've been there. Every pro-life OB-GYN has been there. You make that decision because you want to at least save one. If you could save both, you would. Those are not properly termed abortions. Yes, I know you see the coding of a miscarriage as a spontaneous abortion. But when people say abortion, that's not what they're talking about. And when we ban abortion, that is not what we're talking about. When we ban abortion, we're talking about something different. We're talking about intentional separations which are done for the purpose of producing a dead baby. That is the purpose of an elective induced abortion. That is what's banned when abortions are banned. Why can I say that? Well, let me give you an example. Let's talk about an abortion at 32 weeks. Abortion's attempted, baby survives. Separation did not fail to occur. What failed to occur is the baby failed to die. That's why it's a failed abortion. So you have to understand, when we talk about abortion, we are not talking about miscarriages. We are not talking about ectopic pregnancies. We are not talking about births and C-sections. We are talking about procedures which are done with a very specific intent, and that intent is to produce a dead human being at the end of that procedure. Second point of argument. When the partial birth abortion hearings were done in front of the Supreme Court, long ago, for the ban for partial birth abortions, the abortionists argued, that they were asked, well, you got the baby all the way out of the mom except the head, why don't you just deliver the baby? And they said, because the product we are paid to produce is a dead baby. We are paid to ensure that that baby does not come out of the birth canal alive. It's very clear. And when you understand that argument, you can put to rest the bologna salami, the amazing bologna salami, that is floating around and, oh, you can't treat ectopic pregnancies. Oh my goodness. As though Catholic hospitals didn't treat ectopic pregnancies for 50 years. I mean, come on, guys. We can't treat miscarriages. Yeah, you're going to prevent a miscarriage, really? You can't treat miscarriage? Baby's dead. If your doctor can't tell the difference between a dead baby and a living baby, you need a different doctor. Okay? This is the kind of baloney that once you understand what's really going on, you can cut to the heart of the issue. And the heart of the issue is, do we recognize and protect that neighbor, that human being who is early and who is in the womb? So, okay, now put your heads down if you need to. What are we talking about? What are these procedures? This is a suction abortion. What's happening here, I don't think I have a little, you're going to have to imagine I have a pointer, okay? In the top left, you've got the baby in the womb, and the womb is opened, and a suction that is about 15 times as strong as a vacuum cleaner is put into the womb to suck out the baby, and the baby comes out in pieces. So that can be done up to about 13 weeks. But what happens at 13 weeks? Baby's bones start to calcify. You can't suck calcified bones through a little tiny suction. So from 14 weeks and up, what's done is a D&E, dilation and extraction. So dilation and evacuation. So what happens is that the mother's womb is open and there's a grasper that's put in called a sulfur that does not let go. And the baby's pulled apart in pieces. Baby's alive when this happens. At the end of it, there's a curette that's put in to scrape out the placenta. This is an extremely dangerous procedure, the bigger the baby gets. And when you get past 20 weeks, women are more likely to die from this procedure than they are from childbirth. After 16 weeks and up, they do what's called an intactectomy. Unfortunately, this is the procedure that's the most lucrative because this is the procedure that allows you to harvest the baby's organs and sell them. So these drawings that I show you are from what was presented to the Supreme Court during the partial birth abortion debate. The baby's leg is pulled into the birth canal. The abortionist delivers the baby living, delivers the living baby's entire body except for the head. Scissors are then put into the back of the skull and opened to enlarge a hole enough to put in a very strong suction, and the baby's brains are sucked in. Baby was alive to this point. The dead baby is then removed. Why do I show you that? You cannot understand the financial incentive of universities unless you understand these procedures. There was a big to-do with one university who was advertising for the sale of baby parts. And they said, we minimize the time from circulation to harvesting. What does that mean? Baby's alive up to the very last point when they pull the body out and then they plunge it into the... I mean, it's so gross. But again, you can't understand the debate and the money involved unless you understand what these procedures are. This isn't pop a pill and poof, the baby's gone. We'll get to that in just a minute. But I want to take another moment to just focus on a little philosophy. How did we get to this point? There's 4 lies that the acceptance of abortion in the United States rests on. The first one is, well, it's just a blob of tissue. I have news for you guys. We are all blobs of tissue. Some of us are blobbier than others. We are as organized as that first cell. The second lie is, well, abortion is really good for women. My organization, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, has combed the literature for the last 50 years. We are OB-GYNs that take care of women who have chosen abortion and who have not chosen abortion. We can tell you it is not good for women. Increased risk of preterm birth. 170 studies over 50 decades have shown that women who have surgical abortions are at increased risk of losing a baby in the subsequent pregnancy. What about psychological effects? Women who abort unwanted, unplanned pregnancies compared to women who keep unwanted, unplanned pregnancies. The women who abort are at increased risk of suicide, drug abuse, and major depression requiring hospitalization. This is horrific for women. And what about the whole bugaboo about breast cancer? Well, it's not all abortion, and it's not all breast cancer. It has to do with the development of the breast. When you go from a never pregnant breast to, in that first pregnancy, to a breast that makes milk, the first part of that pregnancy, the breast tenderness, if any of you are familiar with that, is a growth of breast tissue that is immature stem cell type tissue. By the time you reach the point of delivery, that immature tissue has matured to make milk. But you don't make milk if you deliver before 30 weeks. Okay? The reason is because the stem cell tissues haven't matured to make milk. Milk-producing tissue is 100% cancer resistant. By the time you get to the first pregnancy and you go all the way to delivery, about 95% of the breast is cancer resistant. That's why the most important risk factor for breast cancer is the time of first delivery. The most important factor. Nobody disputes that. But if you lose a pregnancy before 20 weeks by automobile accident or infection, but in this country, 1 out of 3 pregnancies are lost before 30 weeks by abortion. You've just arrested your breast in a state where the majority of the breast tissue is now cancer susceptible. 98% of breast cancers arise from that kind of type 1 and 2 tissue. So let's look at this from a different way. What happens with that first pregnancy? We've done research in the Medicaid database to look at women who abort the first pregnancy versus women who deliver the first pregnancy. The women who abort a first pregnancy, 1/3 of them will never, ever have a live birth. They go on to abort and abort and abort. Of the women who choose to deliver the first pregnancy, 3/4 of them will go on to have other children. But that first pregnancy is the index event that sets your reproductive trajectory for the rest of your life. Now, it's not impossible to have an abortion and a year later have a term pregnancy because you changed your mind. You really do want children. That woman who aborts and then immediately has a term pregnancy, she just matured her breast. She's not at risk. It's the women who abort and abort and abort and delay. And there's something about that initial abortion that sets your trajectory. So abortion is not better for women than delivery. We don't want those kind of people reproducing. This is where the money comes in for the abortion industry. And believe you me, this is a monetary issue, and it's so deep and so sad. This makes me weep. And the last one is, if he can walk away, I can walk away. And this is what you as the church are called to address. God did not create a walk-away situation. And unfortunately, for some men, sex is a 5-minute commitment. And for a woman, it's a 20-year commitment. So these are the things that the acceptance of abortion rests on. Let me talk a little bit about this walk-away. Okay? There was a very interesting study done by CareNet, who is a pregnancy resource center, asking women who had had abortions why they had them. And I'm just going to give you some stats. Financial reasons. Timing, it's just not the right time for me to have a baby. Partner-related reasons, 1/3 of the women who aborted because of their partner. So I'm going to tell you a little story here about how I got passionately involved in this issue. I had a patient who came in to see me. She's pregnant. And I told her, look, I'll see you, I want to do an ultrasound, but I want your significant other in the marriage. 6-year relationship wasn't me. Came in, did an ultrasound, 10 weeks, baby's waving, performed well. I said, and I'll just use generic names. I said, Jane, I'm so happy for you. You have a baby. And she said, Dr. Harrison, I have a 13-year-old at home that I have raised by myself. I can't do this again alone. And Fred, in the corner with his newspaper, said, nothing. I said, Jane, so you're telling me that if you had somebody that would walk with you through this pregnancy and be there for you, that you would keep this baby? And Jane said, Dr. Harrison, I just can't do it alone. I know what it's like. It's really tough having a 13-year-old by myself. I can't do it. And Fred said, nothing. And I'm not a patient person. I said, hello, Fred, put down your newspaper. Come over here. Look at who is inside the room, which he reluctantly did, looked. And I said, Fred, do you hear what Jane is saying to you? And he said, well, it's her body, it's her choice. And he went back and sat down behind his paper. And that was the end. She closed, wouldn't talk anymore. Decision was made, and Fred killed his child. Had he just said, Jane, I'll be there for you. Let's get married, let's do this. It's our baby. Had he said that, that baby would be alive. So I don't want you to underestimate the power of the partner-related reasons. This is 31% is probably an estimate, because I think in another study it was 55%. God never intended women to bear children alone. That's why the two become one flesh, guys. It's a one flesh relationship, and what God has put together, and there is undeniable, and God has put two fleshes together in one flesh in that new human being. It is undeniable. What God's put together, let not man put asunder. Don't rip it apart. So this is an issue that American Association of Pro-Life Religions can't address. This is an issue for the church. This is an issue for each of us to talk about. What's the purpose Why do we get in one flesh relationships? There is a purpose. And most women reported multiple reasons for seeking an abortion. 38% of the women indicate that the father of the baby was the most influential person in their abortion decisions. And in another study, 55%. Half. We could eliminate half the abortions if the fathers would man up. Now, having said that, I gave this talk in another place, and I was greeted by a father at the end who was weeping. And he said, I beg her not to kill my child. I would do anything for her. And she said she wasn't going to have it. And she killed her baby. And now I can do nothing about it. There's nothing more heartbreaking as a father than to love your child and have your girlfriend or wife kill that baby. So I want to be sensitive to the fathers who have stepped up and the mothers who've rejected. 58% of women who obtained an abortion experienced a potentially traumatic life event in the 12 months leading up to their abortion. The most common factors: unemployment, breakup, falling behind on rent and mortgage. Does this sound like empowerment to you? This sounds like economic coercion to me. This is not women's empowerment, guys. These are women in desperate situations who they think they've got the answer in abortion, but it never leaves you. Only 12% of women included any physical problem with their health. Less than 1% of women choosing abortion reported they were survivors of rape, and less than half of 1% cited incest. Well, we're Lutherans. Abortion in the church. This is sobering information. Again, this is from the CareNet study. More than 1/3 of abortion recipients reported that they attended church at least once a month at the time of their first abortion. 70% of women who have had an abortion indicate their religious preference is Christian. A third Catholics, a third Protestants, 15% non-denominational. 35% of Christian women who have had an abortion indicate they currently attend church once a week or more. 36% of women were attending a Christian church once a month or more at the time of their first abortion. And 51, half the women who had abortions agreed that churches do not have a ministry prepared to discuss options during an unplanned pregnancy. Maybe some of you hear the voice of God calling. He does use means sometimes. What are we doing? This is something you can do. Think about this. I don't know if I had this slide in here now. Nope, I didn't. What do you think the timing was? They asked the timing for these women. The time from positive pregnancy test to decision to abort. What do you think it was? Any guesses? 24 hours. Oh. Time from decision to abort to completion of the abortion. What do you think? 7 days. She's going to be in church once. If she doesn't know who to talk to, ain't going to happen. The church will fail her in that way. Now, I know there's tons and tons of things that are put on churches. You know, we expect the church to solve this problem, that problem, and the other problem. But this is life and death, guys. This is her eternal soul. We really do need to think about, who is she going to talk to? Who's the woman? I think it's going to be a lot to ask a woman in that situation to talk to a male pastor unless she has a fairly close relationship with him. Who is the woman in the congregation who can keep her mouth shut? Who is known to the congregation to be able to help, to connect people with resources? Who is she? We should wrestle with this question, because we as a church should be able to offer counsel and support to women who are in tough situations, and to the fathers. I learned something in medical school that was amazing to me. Women never get pregnant by themselves. Where's the father? And where's the expectation? Where's the expectation from the male side of the congregation? That, buddy, you sleep with her, you're married. She's your wife. So think 2 or 3 or 4 times before you sleep with somebody, because in the sight of the faithful Christian community, the one you become one flesh with, you have obligations and responsibilities too. So think about it. See, this is the kind of thing that the church needs to address. So, what can you do? Well, this is always the hardest. Walk the talk yourself. You're going to walk the walk today, but let's walk the talk ourselves. Think about purpose of sexuality, purpose of, human beings, neighbors in our life. Be compassionate to women and men who are struggling and meet their physical needs. You can connect to a pregnancy resource center. You can even volunteer with a bot. And most of all, when you speak, breathe hope. The pro-abortion industry breathes despair. You can't do this. You don't have the money. We have the solution for you. Just pay us the bucks and we'll solve it. You can't do this. You're by yourself. Nobody cares about you. You know what? You've got to fight that with hope. You are valuable, invaluable in God's eyes. You are my neighbor. I love you. I care about you, and I'm going to be there and walk with you. If Jane had one person in her life to walk with her through that, her son or daughter would be alive today. So we have to be the ones breathing hope. We have to be the ones saying, yeah, this is good. Life's good. And we care about you. So with that, I'm going to leave you, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you and maybe give you some things to think about and encourage you. Thank you.